Today on With First Pick, we're handing out winners and losers from week 2 of the preseason. With just 17 days until the start of the 2025 NFL season, there's a lot to sort through. That's why I got my guy, as always, Ran Carthon. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's former Titans GM Ran Carthon. And Ran, this is episode 288, and there are 248 days till the 2026 NFL Draft in Pittsburgh, PA. By the way, before we get going, just a couple of housekeeping notes here. Remember, if you want to ask me or Rand a question, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and we'll answer it in an upcoming mailbag. Producer Stryker informs me we'll do one of those probably the night before the start of the regular season opener on Thursday in 13 days. So make a note of that. It can be related to anything football related. Or if you want Rand to give you some life advice, he'll do that too. If you want us to evaluate a FBS or FCS draft eligible player, and we'll do that as well. We'll try to do these things every month or so as the questions come in, and we'll be a little bit better about it than we were last season when things got a little crazy with Rick taking on a new job and leaving me high and dry. But it's been for the best, Rand. By the way, before I get into your weekend, I want to let everyone know that you had to put $1 in the late jar because you thought we were working on Central Time for the start of this podcast. Hopefully it wasn't anything serious because I didn't ask you the details, but did you want to explain yourself? It was something not serious?
No, it was nothing serious.
Okay, I didn't want to step in it.
my time zones are all over the place. Last week, went from Nashville to San Francisco, Fort Lauderdale, Key West, now back in Central Time in Nashville. And forgive me, Ryan, I was having lunch with my wife, and I was like, yeah, honey, it's probably time to, let's wrap up. I want to get home a little bit early, make sure me and StreamYard are on the same page today. And then I got the text from you. So I was already en route headed home.
I apologize to interrupt your lunch with your wife. Hopefully she'll forgive me. So it wasn't serious, but that doesn't make me feel great either. You had to rush home, but I'm glad to see you as always. And look, before we get into this winners and losers, and I don't like to call it winners and losers, but that's just for social media and YouTube purposes. We can just say overachievers and underachievers. But before we do that, I want to hear a little bit about the Ran Carthon Classic, the second annual down in Key West. Between Key West, the Key West Conches, one of my favorite new mascots.
No, it's not Conches. Don't say Conches. It's not.
What are you supposed to call it? Conch?
Conchs.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
That sounds like Florida.
I don't know if to call you a New Yorker or a North Carolinian, but you're definitely not from Florida saying Conches.
Stryker, did you know that? It's called conch?
Oh, I was thinking maybe it was like a conch shell.
Yeah, conch shell. Right. Okay, conch.
I gotta do my research.
It's still a conch.
It's on you, Ryan. Yeah. This is on you. Don't bring me into this.
I'm not going to bring the other Ryan into this, Ryan Stryker. All right, fair enough. Well, thank you for the correction. The Key West conchs.
There you go.
Conch shell? That's what you call it?
It's a conch shell, yes.
Okay. Well, Key West versus Homestead. Last second win, and thanks to what's it called? Volunteer coach Ran Carthon. I saw you on the sidelines in your Jordans waving it hysterically like it was a Super Bowl, which it sort of was. How did that whole weekend go? Because it was a celebration of Ran, as far as I could tell.
Man, it was fantastic. You couldn't ask for nothing better. Like you said, they named the Kickoff Classic, the preseason Kickoff Classic after me last year. Obviously couldn't make it because I was with the Titans and doing our preseason process. But now I'm with Ryan Wilson, and he gave me an off weekend to be able to go home. But it was my first time home in 10 years, a very long time. So it was great to be back home around everyone I grew up. Like you said, we beat Homestead 35-34, so that's bragging rights. Had over 400 yards on the ground, four rushing touchdowns. It was just cool. I got into the game probably a little too much. There's a joke going around amongst my friend group down in Key West that I was down there calling timeouts during the game.
Were you allowed to do that?
No, but I was just into it. I just so happened to be dressed the same as the coaches, so they didn't know if I was actually a coach on the staff or not. I ended the game doing conch jacks with the team and in the middle of the team breakdown. But shout out to everyone in Key West. Shout out to my folks at Island Dogs, Angela and Stevie. They took good care of us. Shout out to Andrew Freeman, the athletic director, Johnny Hughes, the head coach, Aisha Osborne. It was just a great weekend that they put together, and it was just good to be back home around my people.
And I'm glad you went to the pep rally, and I'm glad you appreciate it because, as an older person, time starts flying, and you gotta appreciate the good stuff as it happens. So I'm glad you were able to appreciate that. And I don't know what a conch jack is, but it sounds hard to do. So I'm glad you. How many did you knock out?
Now we just had to spell out conks and
Oh,
doing
okay.
jumping jacks. So I just did it with the fellas, just to get my exercise points up on my watch. So I made it through. Didn't embarrass me. I'll say I didn't physically embarrass myself, but I probably embarrassed myself just being too wild over there on the field.
Everyone's going to embrace that. Trying to win a football game, you guys won, and the running backs went off. So it sounds like a win all around at the second annual Ran Carthon Classic. Man, that's crazy. You got a game named after you. By the way, Striker, my wife said when I'm getting a game named after me because they put Ran up in the Mac Daddy suite for him and his family. Man, I gotta get on that Ran Carthon train. All right, Ran, let's talk about some winners and losers, some overachievers, some underachievers. I'm going to let you start because your guy, and by the way, I'll just make this clear. It could be rookies. We're going to talk about some rookies, some young players. It could be teams, could be coaches, could be virtually anyone. I'll focus primarily on first and second year players, and Ran mixed his up. But you went with Brian Daboll, and I went back and watched Jackson Dart's snaps this morning. We talked about him last week. He was good, man. Had a nice little touchdown, threw a nice little seam route down the field. A lot of short passes to start, and that's fine. I mean, he's going in the right direction. And we talked about last week, there are things to take away from this preseason for young quarterbacks, and he continues to have the arrow point upward, as Mike Tomlin likes to say. But why do you have Brian Daboll on this list? Because we talked about Abdul Carter last week. That defense looks to be very good, but I'm curious because Brian Daboll has been on a hot seat of sorts since that first good season with Daniel Jones back in 2022, I believe.
No, I went with Dave's because they feel like going into this season they have their starter in Russell Wilson, which he's been adamant that, although Jackson Dart's played well, that Russell's going to start the year as their starting quarterback. Now, the real reason why I picked him is because of how he has Jackson Dart playing. Jackson Dart has been very efficient. I think it's 26 of 38 maybe passing, a little under 300 yards. I think he's in the 290 range. He has 3 total touchdowns. And then the biggest thing of all, he has not turned the ball over in his 2 games playing, which is big. You can kind of see an energy shift when he comes in the game. In his last preseason game, they had a drive where Russell was out there. Then they put Jackson Dart in for one play, and then he was able to hit a tight end for an explosive, which was good for them to see. And then he was right back out. And what I like what Daves has done with him is, yes, they've been short passes, but he's putting him in a situation where he can be successful doing things that he's comfortable with. And then it made me think about who Daboll has been as a coach. And I think we've forgotten, but this is the same coach that pulled a quarterback change in the second half of the national championship game when they went from Jalen Hurts to Tua Tagovailoa, a young Tua Tagovailoa, if I could add. And Tua actually ended up throwing the game-winning touchdown to Devontae Smith, and that's when Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator at Alabama. And so he's used to doing things that are a little unconventional when it comes to the quarterback position. But I think he's winning right now because they made the short-term solution in going to get Russell Wilson, someone that they believe in, that can go out there and help them in the interim. But then they traded up to go get a Jackson Dart, which, some people kind of felt like that was going to happen, but then there were some questions about it. And then so far, they've chosen right, and he's been playing some really good ball for them. So Daves was my winner.
That's a good one. And I'll just add this. It's a question more than a comment. So let's say, God forbid, this team starts 1-4, 1-5, and we hear a lot of rumblings about how the ownership continues to be unhappy with the direction of the front office and coaching staff. And the coaching staff has said that the idea is to sit Jackson all season. Do we see Jackson Dart by week or before week 8?
In that scenario, I think there is a chance they can say that they want to be patient, but they got to live with that New York, New Jersey media, and good luck to them for having to deal with that.
Yep.
And so it's something like, can you deal with the outside noise? And that's always the big question, no matter what size market you're in, but particularly in that New York media. because you don't want to be on the cover of page 6, I think it's called, or whatever the big column is, because you didn't make the right decision. Now, I think in the long term, it's probably best to sit him as long as possible until you can feel like he's there. But yeah, I mean, good luck to them for having to figure it out. I mean, look here, the graphic that producer Stryker just put up. Like, good luck with these first 4 games. With these defenses that they're going to have to face. You definitely don't want him facing that gauntlet. And then to come back after that from weeks 5 to 9, you got to play the Eagles twice, and then you got to play the Broncos defense and the Niners defense. So I don't even know, if looking at this schedule, I don't know where's a good point to bring him in to start.
After week 18,
after week 18, without throwing him to the wolves. So yeah, good luck.
Yeah, and if you're listening, throw that up real quick against Stryker, just so people listening, I can let them know. Week 1, the Giants are at the Commanders, then it's at the Cowboys. It's the Chiefs, Chargers, Saints, Eagles, Broncos, Eagles, 49ers. First 9 games. And I mean, man, if we're being honest with ourselves, there might be 1.5 wins on that first 9 game schedule just based on recent history, and that would be the Saints and 50-50 against the Chargers at home. But, I mean, they could win 5 games, but it's going to be tough sledding. The other thing I'll say, and I agree with you, Rand, I think that Jackson should sit as long as possible. But I said the exact same thing about Drake May, and I could not have been more wrong about him. I don't think – I'll ask you this. Would he have been better off had he not played last year, only played 2 weeks at the end of the season? Because I think he is way further along, even though he took a bunch of lumps last season on a really bad team.
Yeah, no, I've been a believer in Drake May for a while. I remember when Josh Downs was coming out of there, and I went in to see Josh Downs, and I was impressed with Drake May's his calmness in the pocket, his accuracy, more than anything. And he was a young guy at that time, and I remember coming back, spinning some tape. I was like, okay, he's going to be one of those guys, here in a couple years. And so a guy like that, and again, where your program is. It's and where the New England Patriots program was last year. You roll with it, and everyone has to deal with it. Now, this Giants team it's a better team than what the New England Patriots have last year, especially when it comes to that defense. And now you're in position where you can make some noise if you got the right guy at quarterback. And so the worst thing that could happen is if you have a young quarterback with a really good, not say really good team, but a good team, a good competitive team around them, and then they're the reason why they lose. And that kills a young guy's confidence. So until they build that, until they can get a good rapport, like I said, for the future, I think it's best to sit him.
Yeah, to your previous point there, may I introduce you to Kenny Pickett? As a angry Steelers fan, I ain't over that yet. All right, my winner. And by the way, just because we don't mention your guy doesn't mean he had a terrible week or we hate him. It's just we can't do an 8-hour show. But I'll mention a couple guys here just off the top so you feel good. I thought Cam Ward had another good week. I think he was only 2 of 7, but he had some big boy throws and the series or 2 that he was out there. Caleb Williams looked like USC Caleb Williams on Sunday night. Excuse me. That was fun. I'm going to go with my guy. I'll mention my guy, Spencer Rattler. I can't not mention Spencer. He threw an interception in the 4th quarter on the next to last series, I believe. But you can make a pretty good case, and I haven't gone back and watched it. But Mason Tippmann looked like he didn't run that slant as aggressively as perhaps Spencer wanted him to, but came back on that last drive, threw a big out against outside leverage cornerback. I think Tippmann made the play on that, and then threw a touchdown to Dante Pettis to get it within 2, and then he ran into the 2-point conversion to tie it, and thankfully ties are now a thing in preseason, so it ended in a tie. So great job by Spencer. But I'm going to go with Miami 7th round pick, Quinn Ewers. And I went back and watched his throws this morning, Ran. He was 11 of 17, 116 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And he looked like the Quinn Ewers we all thought we were expecting to see when Quinn is healthy, making off-platform throws, showing off a little arm strength, fitting balls into tight windows. His first drop back was a play action. He threw a dagger concept and threw it on time and hit the receiver in the face. I think it was a PBU. The cornerback may have made a really good play on the ball, but Theo Weiss out of Missouri, he played with Luther Burden, had a big evening as well. So I was very happy with the way Quinn Ewers played. And I guess the bigger issue, no one's going to replace Tua, but the issue with the quarterback situation in Miami is how healthy is Tua going to be throughout the season, because historically he's struggled to stay healthy. And then I'll ask you this, Rand. Given the way that Quinn had a tough week 1 preseason, bounced back nicely here, they have Zach Wilson as the other backup. So in the eventuality that Tua does get hurt, and you hope he doesn't, but this is football, would you feel more comfortable after 2 weeks of preseason and training camp and all that, rolling with Zach? Or do you think Quinn might have the ability, because he's not a guy that only played a year and a half in college. He's played a lot of college ball. It's just injuries has been his issue too, just like Tua. Would you lean one towards the other, maybe think about shipping the other guy in a trade or something? Because they're going to be a need for quarterbacks here, it feels like, over the next few weeks.
No, I think they'll first and foremost, I think they're going to keep all 3.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go back and you study the numbers, you study this offense, they've always been better off when they kept 3. Now, how they get to 3, it could be 2 on the roster, 1 on the practice squad. It could, because of who Quinn Ewers is and how some may view him, even though he was a 7th-round pick. They may not want to roll the dice and risk trying to waive him and sneak him through the waivers to the practice squad. So they may just keep 3. However, when he was drafted by the Dolphins, I thought this was a good pick. He felt like a guy that could fit that system with the nakeds and the rollouts and the boots and those things and throwing on time. If he gets the throwing on time part and playing in this offense, which they have the ability to consistently scheme number 1 open, and as long as he can accurately get the ball to number 1, he has a chance. And to get in this offense, you just have to play point guard. You just have to get the ball into the hands of the people that can score and let them do the work. And that's why for the skill positions, yards after the catch, yards after contact are so huge. But I'm glad that you picked him, because you picking him, I would have picked him, especially how the first week looked.
Oh boy.
And then for him to bounce back and have this type of week, like he's definitely making some noise for himself. But I still think they will enter the season with Zach Wilson as the number 2, just because of he has experience in this offense. That's when Mike LaFleur was the offensive coordinator when he was drafted under Robert Saleh, and so he has familiarity with this offense and has played a ton of ball in this league. So. I think Quinn will ultimately make the team, but I love the way he bounced back this week.
And give a shout out to your position here. Ollie Gordon II had a pretty nice game as well. And he is not the prototypical Mike McDaniel running back, in that he doesn't look like Devon Achane or Jalen Wright. He's more of a home run, like between the tackles, bushy in the mouth type guy. And I think that's fair or not. This team needs to be a little tougher. So I thought it was good to see him play well. He, going into the season 12 months ago, was getting talked about as a top 100 guy, went on day 3, but once you're in the room there in the building, you're playing NFL football. So just make your case and see what happens. So good start by Quinn, good start by Ollie in week 2, and we'll keep an eye on him. All right, let's take a quick break here. No, wait, we're doing losers first. Sorry. Got ahead of myself. Underachievers. We don't want to call them losers, Rand. And so I'm going to make a case. Your guy is Hendon Hooker, who's now entering his 3rd year. Was drafted not as a developmental quarterback, but he was coming off the ACL injury, and we knew that Jared Goff was the guy, and you wanted to see some semblance of progress. And it's been a rocky start to the preseason. Went back and watched his throws from week 2, and he wasn't all terrible. First 2 dropbacks are sacks. That ain't great. But the first drop back looked like some sort of flood concept where everyone was basically standing in the same area. I don't think that's how that was supposed to work. So I don't know if you're going to blame on that or not. The other one, they ran, I'm looking at my notes here. They ran a play action like split flow, and they had the tight end blocking the edge, and the edge just won. And Hendon didn't have a lot of time to get his head around. So I'm not making excuses for him, but it wasn't as bad in person as it was on the stat sheet. That said, he has not been setting the world afire.
Yeah, and it's this is a guy. He's a smart kid. He understands and knows what they're trying to run. It just hadn't materialized for him, and he was pulled from one of the preseason games for not, for turnovers. And I'm looking at his numbers here on the preseason and through 2 games. He's 10 of 16 for 56 yards passing and no touchdowns and an interception. So and 2 lost fumbles. That doesn't lead to you being the backup quarterback. And the reason why I have him in this category, and I will say he's an underachiever, because right now he's going to have to, fight off Kyle Allen to be the number 2 quarterback. And when you look at this roster is built to compete and go to the Super Bowl. And God forbid, let's knock on wood here, that God forbid something happens to Jared Goff.
Right.
And if something happens to Jared Goff and in the way in which Hendon Hooker has played, do you have confidence that he can at least get you through a 3-4 game stretch, if you will, and at minimum go 2-2?
Right.
Do you as a coaching staff, do you as a fan base have confidence in Hendon Hooker to get that done right now? And I can't say that you do.
And Kyle Allen is one of those guys that just hangs around. He gets 40, 50 snaps a season, and he does exactly what you're talking about. He keeps the boat afloat. It ain't going to be a speedboat, but it ain't going to sink either. So those are the things that you have to worry about. And those are fair concerns. It just goes to show you. I mean, it's unfortunate that he had that ACL injury his last season at Tennessee, but some guys overcome those things and they're able to hit the ground running, and other guys need a few years. And Jared Goff can speak to that too. He was traded from LA to Detroit for a reason, and sometimes take guys a little bit longer than others. So I love Hendon coming out. Hopefully he gets it together, because your point is an important one. He's staring QB3 in the face as we sit here. By the way, before I get to my underachiever, shout out to my guy Jackson Meeks. Georgia transferred to Syracuse last year and was a big part of what they did with Kyle McCord and Rondé Gatson, LaQuinn Allen. So far this preseason ran, he has 11 catches for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns, just 1 drop. The other ball, he had 13 targets. The other ball was bad at the line of scrimmage, so not his fault. He ran in the 4.6s. And while he's a big target, he's going to be a possession guy. But he's doing everything that he's being asked to do. And as an undrafted free agent, that's all you can do. And you hope he has a chance to make this team. But I wanted to give him a shout out because he had a big game the other night as well. All right, my underachiever for True here. And this is probably the least surprising development in recent human history. Joe Milton III. Man, Joe Milton can throw the ball out of any stadium. You can line up all 32 stadiums, and he's standing at the first one. It'd land in the 32nd stadium. That's how big his arm is. But here's the first drop back. They're on their own, deep in their own end, their own 3-yard line, 3rd and 14, and they run a little slant flat to the left. He doesn't throw the slant, trying to throw the flat that's covered, and takes a sack for a safety. That ain't how you want to start your day. And he got the start in the first quarter, so that was their very first series. This is all going to sound familiar to you if you watch Joe Milton at all throughout Michigan, Tennessee, New England, and now Dallas. Struggles with downhill accuracy and consistency. Sometimes he holds the ball too long. We'd like to see him throw a little bit more anticipation, all the things we've talked about. But the problem is that after Dak, it's Will Grier versus Joe Milton III. And to the point you just made previously, if Jared Goff isn't in there, you need to have a plan B. How do you feel about this statement? I would rather have Kyle Allen as my backup than Joe Milton III or Will Grier from the Dallas Cowboys.
I mean, that's a great argument, and
it's a sad argument.
But I'll say this too. In what you were saying, you have to remember that the Cowboys gave up a draft pick. No matter where it was, you gave up a draft pick for Joe Milton.
Yeah.
He's talented. He has physical traits and physical tools, but a lot of this position is played from the neck up, which has nothing to do with the physicality part. And so if Joe Milton wants to take the next step and become the guy that he thinks he is, which is why he's even in Dallas in the first place, there's a lot of areas of his game that he has to fix. And it's cool. It's cool to be able to do the trick shots and throw the ball from Stadium 1 to Stadium 32. But you're not going to make those type of throws in games. You don't need those throws, though. It's all about timing, accuracy, anticipation. You got to be able to do those things. You got to be able to process. You got to understand situational football. Like you said, to be backed up, and if they're running, you said a slant flat concept, you know where you are on the field. You got to be able to get the ball out, and you definitely can't take a sack back there. And especially with someone with his athleticism, like you can't take a sack. You got to know when to just get rid of the ball and live to see another down. So these are all areas where he's going to have to improve, because just like we said with the previous guy, Dak has an injury history. It is what it is. Yep. And this team, they want to compete. They're in a very, very tough division that you can't afford to get behind the 8 ball in. And so if something happens to Dak, then what?
Something happens to Dak, that's a wrap. 2 more things I'll point out about Joe Milton. Situationally, in just following up on what you're talking about here, you have to see more. And maybe they said this was a 2-minute drill into the first half. They're in midfield. Maybe they said we got to score. Maybe they're treating it like the end of the game. I don't know. But based on just what I saw, he threw a deep ball against a deep post safety that was so deep that he wasn't going to overthrow him. And he made the easiest interception in the end zone that perhaps that deep safety's ever made. Again, I don't know the specifics of what they told him to do, but if we're just talking situational football at the end of the first half with a chance to score because they were down at the time, I don't think you want to make that throw. But on the surface, that wasn't great. Now, where he excels, he can make subtle movements in the pocket and then obviously unleash it. He threw a bomb to Jonathan Mingo down the right side that was a laser for 50 yards. Those things we know he can do, but all the other stuff that you're talking about, that's the real issue in terms of helping this team win games should they not have their number one quarterback out there. All right, let's take another break here, or our first break. When we come back, we got some more overachievers and underachievers, we'll call them, and we'll talk about those guys right after this.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
that is a rookie mistake,
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Yeah. All right, Ran, going to get to your next winner, overachiever. And I think this young man qualifies as both. I remember he was a late add to the Shrine Bowl roster, showed up after a practice or two and just balled out. And I went back and looked at what my write-up for him over the draft process. He was undrafted because he ran a 4.71, but his three-cone was in the 6.7 range, I believe, which is close to all-pro level. Eastern Washington last year, he had 152 targets, 122 receptions, 4 drops. And Efton Chisholm III, Eastern Washington, undrafted free agent out of he plays for the Patriots now. And look, I don't want to stereotype, but let's be real. He feels like the next Wes, Julian, Rex, Danny, and I'll include Pop Douglas in there just so people don't get angry. But undersized slot receiver who can do a little bit of everything. He scored a touchdown over the weekend on a little mesh route, caught it like at the 7-yard line, just ran over guys and dragged him to the end zone. So I'll ask you this: as an undrafted free agent who ran a 4.7, but is obviously quick in space and he can play the slot, like that's exactly what he was built for. What are the chances you think he makes his team? And just so we're clear, this is your winner, and I'm glad you put him on here.
Yeah, I think he makes the team, and if he doesn't, he'll be claimed by someone, and he'll be on someone's team. He currently leads the team and actually tied for first in the entire league in preseason with 12 receptions. He has 121 yards. That's 5th in the league, and he has 2 touchdowns. That's also tied for first during the preseason. He's had 6 catches in each of the first 2 preseason games, have 6 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown versus Washington. He was targeted 8 times in that game. And then against Minnesota, he caught all 6 of his targets for 71 yards and had another touchdown. So you talked about before how much he was targeted in college last year and the efficiency in which he caught those balls. So now we're looking at it right now where he's caught 12 out of the 14 targets. And he has 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards. So those numbers scream efficiency for a slot receiver, right? And this guy's shown up. He's balled out. He stood out for them all the way through training camp. And these games are just showing that whatever he's done on the practice field has carried over to the games. So shout out to you, Efton.
Yeah, number one, Hall of Fame name, both first and last name, Efton Chisholm. Number 2, Eastern Washington, they just found ways to get him the ball because he was the best player on the field typically every single snap. And whatever the way, they just put the ball in his hands and he did the rest. And sometimes that translates. I know he's not playing power 4 or whatever we're calling it now, but like I said, he went to the Shrine Bowl, didn't look out of place at all. And here's the Seth Diggs is making the roster, Kendrick Bourne, Pop Douglas. They have Mac Hollins, who they signed in the offseason. And then after that, it's going to be a battle between Keyshawn Boutte, Javon Baker, who they drafted last year, and Jalen Polk, who they drafted last year. Jalen Polk was a 2nd-round pick, and I bring this up every single time. People might be tired of hearing about it, but I'm going to keep bringing it up. They traded out of that pick, moved down a few spots to get Jalen Polk, and let the Charger take Ladd McConkey. This team would be a lot better with Ladd McConkey. To quote the not-so-great Ryan Wilson, don't overthink it. But maybe they found their consolation prize in Efton Chisholm III. You think he gets a lot of looks early on in the season if he does make the roster as a whether it's a number 5 or whatever, just being a third down difference maker in the middle of the field?
I think it's possible. I mean, you would have to know Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels. I mean, look, Julian Edelman was a 7th-round pick when he was taken, and we saw what he became. And so they'll find a role for him. It's just a matter if they're going to keep 5 or 6 receivers. They probably end up keeping 6 just because of Josh McDaniels' system, and there's a lot of 11 personnel in that. But I think this guy so far, he's earned the right. Let's see how he finishes out. I mean, and he's led them in receptions in both preseason games. Like, that's hard to ignore. And like I said, if he doesn't make their team, there are 31 other teams, and somebody else is going to put in a claim for him.
Right. And the understanding is when you put in the claim, he has to be on the 53 because you can't that's the whole reason you can't sneak him under the practice squad, correct?
Correct. You have to, when you claim them, they have to go, they're going straight to your roster.
Gotcha. All right. My winner, and shout out to you, Ran, for getting an undrafted free agent on here. I'm getting a 2nd-round pick. I try to not do the 1st-rounders because we talk a lot about those guys. But I went with Drew Makuba, the 2nd-round pick out of Texas by way of Clemson. And he's undersized as far as sort of safeties go, but he can cover tight ends. He can cover big receivers out of the slot. And he didn't play in the first week of the preseason because of shoulder injury. Had an interception over the weekend against Dylan Gabriel and the Browns on a route that I'm still not sure who was in the wrong, but I'm not sure it was Dylan Gabriel. Either way, Makuba not only took advantage of the interception, he took it to the house for a pick 6. And we saw those ball skills at Texas last year. He had one in the conference championship game against Georgia and Carson Beck. I think it was Carson Beck before Carson got hurt. And then he had one against Arizona State at the end of that game in the playoffs. And you talk to his teammates at Texas and at Clemson, incredibly smart kid. And it's clear that Vic Fangio trusts him when he's on the field. Played deep half, and he would come down and rotate, both coming into the box and play the deep post safety when they stayed single high. So I'll ask you this, Rand, if he's able to start or see significant playing time, that does help out the rest of that secondary because they're moving Cooper DeJean around trying to find a spot for him. Obviously, they have Quinshawn Mitchell. They traded for Jacorian Bennett, so he and Keely Ringo have to figure some things out on the outside, and I'll talk about Keely in a moment, and then Reed Blankenship. But how likely is it that a rookie can come in and play one of the toughest positions? And do you have faith that Makuba can perhaps do this in a Vic Fangio system that, not everyone picks up right away?
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure on the safety in that defense, just with what's required of them. And like you said, they're trying to find a home for Cooper DeJean, just moving him around, getting him settled. But if Cooper DeJean is going to be your safety and then play nickel and sub, that's 60% of what NFL defenses run now is nickel. And so now you got a guy like Andrew Makuba who can come in that nickel situation where he's not forced to be a starter per se, but he's going to play a lot, someone that you trust. And I mean, the guy was taken in the 2nd round. So there is no, hey, well, let's see how he comes along. No, they took him in the 2nd round for a reason, to play in this defense. And so as long as he's picking it up, they'll get him out there on the field and he'll compete. Like the way he played, I loved him coming out of Texas. And just because he's a little guy, like he will run and smack you in the face. He doesn't turn anything down, which is what you love, because that's the first thing to say, oh, will he hit anybody? He's small. And so he'll come down, he'll go Rydell to Rydell with you and
I like
and
that
put his helmet on you. And that's what this defense is going to need, especially replacing a guy like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, because that was the way he played. And I think Andrew Makuba could come in, and he's not as big as Chauncey, but I think he can come in and give you some similar style productivity.
Yeah, and maybe a little not quite as saucy after the whistle too, which is in some ways a good thing to avoid the sort of silly mistakes. But with Chauncey, you like him playing on the edge there, and they got to figure out how to fill that hole. And I love Makuba as well, and I'm glad that he got drafted where he did, and to the system that he got drafted in. And I don't care that he weighs whatever 185 or 190, as long as he can stay healthy. All right, let's go to some underachievers, and this one actually might be a real loser. I'll let you decide the actual name. Your next up on your list, the Cincinnati Bengals, and I'm assuming this has to do with Trey Hendrickson, but you can tell me how deep down the Bengals rabbit hole you want to go on this one.
Yeah, this is, I mean, at this point, what are we doing?
And let's be clear here, because you empathized with Shamar Stewart, but you thought that he probably could have done himself more favors instead of holding out for as long as he did, correct? So you're not just straight up team player. You have some concerns about the Bengals in particular in this situation, right?
Yeah, so just to go back a little bit with Shamar Stewart, I thought Shamar could have helped himself by signing the waiver that they give every draft pick, which the waiver states that in the event of an injury, the team promises and agrees to negotiate in good faith as if that player was healthy. Every Cam Ward, the number 1 overall pick, he signed that waiver to go out and play until his contract was executed. So I think Shamar could have helped himself in doing that. And let's be real, like I think he eventually got 500,000 extra or not extra, but it was more in the signing bonus, but the language wasn't taken out.
Right.
And whether you got the 500,000 in a signing bonus, which means you got it right now, or it came at a later date, it's still money that you were going to get, right? Because you're a first round pick, your 4 years are fully guaranteed. So what did you gain from that? Because if you were standing on the side of the language, well, the language wasn't removed, and the money that was all you were already getting, and you got it a little earlier. So whatever. But for this exercise, we're still talking about Trey Hendrickson, whose issue with the team preceded Shamar Stewart's deal, and we're still from the outside looking in. I don't have any inside sources over there, and don't care to call anybody, try to figure out what's going on at this time. But it's like this guy's coming off of back-to-back 17 sack seasons. He's an all-pro, and he's one of the leaders of the defense. Whether you want to pay him or not, he's produced.
Right.
And so, and again, and I'm about messaging and the message that it sends to the rest of the locker room. You went through a contract battle with both of the receivers that you ended up getting done in T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Both of those guys had to wait to get paid. And so this seems to be the way the Cincinnati Bengals want to do business. But I think it just sends a bad message to the locker room, and that guys who perform at this level, as you can see here, most sacks in the season by the Bengals. Look at it, 14, 17 and a half, 17 and a half, all by the same guy. And for the rest of the locker room, if they're not willing to pay this guy, what makes you think they're going to want to pay you? Which is, right, I'm sure guys are thinking about in that locker room. So, whether you ultimately trade him, get some for him, get a player back, whatever the case may be, like something has to be done. You're entering the final week of the preseason, and week 1 is upon us, and you're no closer to a resolution. So to me, that's losing ball.
I could not agree more. You're
and at a time where you have a new defensive coordinator and your defense didn't play particularly well last year, you need as many weapons to make defensive coordinator Al Golden's defense click. And your number 1 weapon that you have on defense, you're no close to a resolution with him.
And your number 2 weapon held out and was fans were angry at him. And Shamar Stewart's actually done pretty well in the work since, but we haven't seen him in a real game yet. And if you're saying Trey Hendrickson's 30 years old and the Bengals don't want to pay him, okay. TJ Watt's 30 years old as well, and he just got $41 million a year. Is Trey in the same conversation as TJ? No, but he ain't far behind. Also, as you point out, on a defense that stinks. The other thing, according to reports, I don't think the Bengals have come out and said this, but sounds like the Bengals reportedly want a first-round pick and a defensive player in return. I don't know what planet they're living on, but do you envision a situation where you're getting a first-round pick and a defensive player for a guy that you got to sign to a new deal if you're the other team?
No, and that's what it comes down to. And is you got to, and it's one of those deals, man, where it's easier on our side to say, oh, this is what it's going to take to get the deal done. Right. And for, our viewing public to say, well, why won't they just, take a first round pick? Well, first of all, you got to have a team that's willing to give up a first round pick. You got to have a team that's willing to give up a first round pick and a player. But then you also have to have a team that is willing to give up a first round pick, a player, and have the cap space to get a deal done.
Right.
And so, how many of those situations present themselves? And you don't know how much of a say Trey Hendrickson and his team have in this. because the team that may trade for him may be a team that's it's not close to competing.
Right.
And so does Trey Hendrickson want to go to a team that's not going to compete just to get paid? I don't know. Never met him, don't know what his psyche is and what his appetite is for that. However, it's not as easy as it sounds. And so, let's see if Trey Hendrickson's feet are dug in, because I live by the motto that everyone has a price, right? Like, and will he pull a Shamar Stewart and come back because they've guaranteed a little bit more money, or will he be stubborn and dig his feet in and say no and miss a game or two? We'll see.
I wonder in his most candid moments what Joe Burrow thinks about this, because it feels like you're putting a lot of pressure on that offense to score. I'm not even joking, like 35 points a game to be competitive.
Yeah, and I mean, and I do have this team as a playoff team, whether it's the 6 seed or the 7 seed, make it in there just because of the offensive firepower, and that's if those guys stay healthy, right? Because T. Higgins has missed a ton of time. Joe Burrow's dealt with some injuries here and there, but if you can keep these guys healthy, I think they are capable of putting up a ton of points. But when playoff football comes, you got to be able to stop people. And you got to be able to play defense. And the smart teams will shorten the game, knowing that they have a defense that can make stops, and lean on that and shorten the game and keep Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase off the field and force you to score, in those gotta have it moments. So the way this team is constructed is they're going to lean heavily on their offense, which is nothing wrong with that. But when you have a guy that has produced at the level of Trey Hendrickson, that's holding out, that still needs to get paid, I think you have to figure out a way to make that happen.
Common sense would suggest as much, but hey, what do we know? We're in the media. Rams only in the league for 20 years.
Which is probably why I'm in the media now, but go ahead. I digress.
Yeah, you must have been terrible in your previous life. You got stuck with me. All right, let's go to my underachiever, and he is an underachiever. He's not a loser. Keely Ringo, former 4th-round pick, I believe, day 3 pick anyway, out of Georgia. He had some first-round buzz coming out and then didn't have a great final year in the SEC, but he's battling for a starting job on the outside opposite Quinyon Mitchell. And I went back and watched his reps over the weekend against the Browns. He was fine, both the run and the pass, wasn't asked to do a lot. Previous week, he had a rough outing against Jamar Chase, gave up a touchdown. And Vic Fangio said, I'm not upset with you giving up the reception, but I'm not happy that you missed the tackle that allowed Jamar to moonwalk into the end zone. According to reports, I haven't seen him. He had a couple of rough joint practices, and there's a reason they traded for Ja'Cory Bennett, because they wanted some competition there. Darius Slay's now in Pittsburgh. We know Quinshon's going to be the starter. We know that Cooper DeJean is going to play some places. We talked about Reed Blankenship, and earlier we talked about Drew Makuba. But if you don't have a number 2 outside corner, or at least you're concerned about him being out there consistently to the point that you trade for someone midway through the preseason, that tells me there's some things you're trying to figure out this late in the process, which isn't a great place to be.
No, 100%. And then you also got to add in Adoree Jackson there.
And Adoree, thank you.
Who's also fighting for a spot, a veteran guy who's been around. And Ryan, was Keely Ringo was a 4th-round pick, correct?
I believe so. I'll double check, but I think he was.
But that's what I mean. When he first came out, or was during that season prior to him coming out and for the draft, there was some 1st-round talk. But very seldomly do guys go from 1st-round talk to the 4th round. And especially with a guy of his size coming from the program that he came from, I think there's always been some concerns in some certain areas of Keely Ringo's game. And I think that's what you're seeing now. And where it's the talent level is there, but the competitive passion isn't consistent. And I think you see that a lot. And I think because of the way he's built and what you see in his body, you're going to always expect more from him, but you leave disappointed when you don't see it. And after a certain time, you have to ask yourself if it's even in there. Now, what we have a tendency to do in our business, and I'm saying our business in terms of being evaluators, is we love to say, like, oh, this guy's got upside. Mm-hmm. Because you see stuff that you think he's capable of doing that you may not necessarily have seen him do. And so that's what we label the upside. And then when the coaches see it, the coaches are all, these coaches are very confident in their ability, and they all say, "Oh, I can get it out of them."
Right.
But at some point, you have to accept the fact that although it may be there, you hadn't gotten out of him, and maybe it's just not coming to the surface. So, you got to call a spade a spade. I like Keeley coming out, but I had those same concerns about the consistent with his, competitive passion. So the consistency of it, rather.
Yeah, and clearly Vic Fangio feels the same way. And that's, again, if you're trading for someone in the middle of the preseason, that sends up some red flags here. So, I mean, Keeley has time to help himself and figure this thing out. And maybe this is a situation where you have Jacorian as more depth. I would say this: no other fan in the NFC is crying for the Eagles. I think they're going to be okay whether Keeley starts or not. All right,
They'll figure it out.
They'll figure it out. Let's take a quick break here. We'll come back and continue our journey down the underachiever, overachiever path to victory. Making up stuff here. We'll do that right after this.
Tonight's the night. What do you think?
Stream every Dexter episode ever, exclusively on Paramount Plus.
All right, Rand, I'm so excited you put this young man on and he is truly a winner because Jake Moody, kicker for the 49ers by way of Michigan. I have to double check. He may have been a 3rd-round pick.
Yeah, he was a high pick for him. I believe it was 3rd round.
Yeah, it might have been a comp pick at the end of day 2. And it feels like sometimes that comes with additional pressure for specialists, whether you're a punter or a kicker, and it doesn't always seem to work out. And there were conversations last year, fans were calling for him to be replaced because he did struggle. And all he did was go out this weekend and hit a 59-yarder to win it at the buzzer. And 2 other kicks in the 4th quarter. He hit a 50-yarder and a 44-yarder. I think he went 4 for 5 on the day. And that's a great development. And as someone who worked for the 49ers, and you know Kyle Shanahan well, I'm not sure how maybe you can let me know, how does Kyle feel about kickers? Because some coaches think kickers are just weirdos who are on the other field and you need them 3 or 4 times a game. And how much does this put to rest any concerns he might have when it's crunch time, telling Jake to go out there and hit a kick?
Well, I mean, Kyle views the kickers just like he views all the other players on the team. You got a job to do, and they expect you to do it.
Right.
And especially with this offense, they're going to score points, and they're going to be able to score points. So you're expected to make those kicks in those situations. And I love the fact that it was the scenario in which it came. Like you mentioned, the 59-yarder that was the game winner. It was a 3rd down play. But they got in position on 2nd down, and then 3rd down, they went for the kick. These are all scenarios in which you practice. It was 4 seconds left. And then this graphic here is because I was watching this game. This is one of the main reasons why I put him on there, right? And because there are a ton of other guys that you could have went with, but the reaction from his teammates, right? Because this is an important year for Jake Moody. This is going into his 3rd year. And like you mentioned, he struggled last year. He was a smidge over 70 or at 70% field goals last year. He was 24-34 on the season. And he struggled from that 40 to 49 range where he was 6 of 11. And he also struggled from 50 plus. He was 4 from 9. And so he had his struggles. He missed 3 games with a high ankle, trying to make a tackle on kickoff. So it was just a down year. It was a bad year for him. And so right now you're coming into this year, the first game he didn't make a field goal attempt. And then this week he goes 5 for 6. And his one miss was from 50. However, he was 2 for 3 from 50 plus yesterday, and including a 59-yard game winner. So this was a big confidence boost for him. It was a big confidence boost for all his teammates to rush out on the field. They carry him off on the shoulders. Like, all these things matter when you're a young guy and you're coming out of a funk, and this gives you confidence. And so I had to put him down, man. You make 5 field goals to help your team win a game. Just wanted to show Jake some love. So shout out to you, Jake. This should be good momentum for him to carry on moving forward.
And it feels like kicker, more than most positions, there are a few exceptions, probably quarterback. Confidence has a lot to do with it because you're doing the same thing over and over again. It's like golf. You're not changing your swing. You're just kicking the ball. And mentally, if you're not there, or if you feel like you're the only guy in the locker room and no one's talking to you, that can certainly change the outcome of what you're asked to do in your day to day. So I'm with you, man. I was glad to see that, and I'm glad he smoked that 59-yarder. And might as well give Cam Little a shout out too for hitting a 70-yarder last week. That was nuts. Stryker and I were I talked about Spencer Rattler on Sunday for Stryker when he was producing HQ, and that was fun. But for some reason, the Jaguars at the end of that game when it was tied didn't bring Cam out to hit a 60-plus yarder. They threw the ball and threw an interception to end it, but like that was a layup there. Just get Cam out there to blast it. All right, my winner. And I'll be honest, like I wasn't a huge Pat Bryant fan coming out of the draft, at least in terms of him being a third-round pick, which is where the Broncos took him, to Illinois wide receiver. Big target, long strider. He felt like a possession receiver. He ran a 4.61, so that sort of confirmed what you saw on tape. But I got to start giving George and Sean Payton their due because they know who they're drafting. Like Bo Nix, 12th overall. Hey, that worked out. Some of the other guys that they've taken in recent years. And I think Pat Bryant is off to a great start, and he had a really good week last weekend. And the funny thing is, I'm trying to find my notes here. We've seen Sean compare Pat so far through training camp, OTS prior to that, and then the preseason game thus far. Michael Thomas, because Michael Thomas didn't run a blazing fast time coming out of Ohio State, I believe, but he was unstoppable in that offense in New Orleans with Drew Brees. I don't know if Pat Bryant's going to be at that level, but he's not going to be asked to be either. They have Cortland Sutton, of course. They have Evan Ingram now there. They drafted R.J. Harvey in the run game, and I think this might be a situation, Rand, where we overthink it as media draft folks, but the fit makes sense in Denver in terms of what they're looking for and what they want to do. So this isn't a fit for everyone in the third round, but Pat Bryant might be the guy that Sean Payton wants to do what he wants to get accomplished in that offense.
Yeah, historically, if you look at what Sean did in New Orleans with some of the receivers they had, the Marcus Colstons, the big guys that, and I'm sure, Colston at best was a 4.57 guy, but he could have very well been 4.63. But he played a key part in that offense. He's a Saints Hall of Famer, and if I'm not mistaken, if he doesn't have the record for most receptions, he's got to be in the top two, just in history of the Saints organization. So Sean has always done a really good job of having prototypes in what he's looking for in his offense at all the skill positions, and being able to consistently find those guys, whether it's via the draft, whether it's via trade or waiver claims, free agent signings that may not fit what everyone else is looking for, but he finds a way to create a role for them. And, like you said, like that's what we had success as a team in Indianapolis with Bill Polian as the GM and the team we built, because Bill Polian's draft board looked different from everyone else's. And he valued guys at a different level than maybe some other teams because it was specific to the schemes that we ran on offense, defense, and special teams. And that's what you're seeing from George Payton and Sean Payton right now.
Yeah, and that's something to keep in mind if you're a fan and you get angry because you've been reading a bunch of mock drafts or draft boards leading up to the draft and your team takes a guy too high or too low. We're all in this thing together. We don't know. We're just figuring it out together.
And then also for our fans, for the faithful with the First Pick podcast listeners, like whoever your favorite team is, I challenge you to really dig your heels in, and really study and research what your offense, your defense, and your special teams are trying to do, as opposed to listening to Ryan and I, talk about who the best players are. Because what Ryan and I can help you with is we can tell you who's available in the draft just from a totality standpoint. And for you as a fan, you can now tie those players into what your favorite team is running in their schemes. And that'll help you out tremendously come draft night when they make a pick that you're unfamiliar with or that most are unfamiliar with, but you'll understand what your team is trying to do and how that player fits.
That's a fantastic point and cannot reiterate that enough. And I'll give you a real world example because I didn't love Caleb Johnson coming out of Iowa. I thought he ran too upright. He played in a zone scheme in Iowa. Guess what Arthur Smith likes to run? Likes to run wide zone. Guess what Caleb Johnson, guess why they took him in the third round? To run that. He actually had a pretty good weekend, preseason week 2, but they're not going to take – they would have taken Ashton Jeanty had he been there. But Caleb fit what they wanted to do in the round that they got him, and that's why he went higher than perhaps he may have had he gone to a gap scheme team. So those are just little things to keep an eye on. And like I said, we'll find out together whether it's the right pick or not, but you can understand in theory, why the Steelers would have done that with Caleb Johnson. And that's great advice. All right, let's go to an underachiever. You went with the Bengals previously. You got another underachiever team this time in the NFC. The Cowboys. And I don't know if this dovetails nicely with my Joe Milton concern at QB2, or if it will dovetail nicely with my underachiever after you go, who happens to be a member of the Cowboys defense. What do you got?
Yeah, this is strictly. I'm not going to say it's strictly Micah Parsons,
And there's Micah.
driven. But again, like I said with the Bengals, what are we doing? And again, I'm not involved in the negotiations, but you have a guy that's shown up, every week. He's there in the building. He's there at practice. And again, I don't know what's going on. This one here, I choose to just stay out of. But like, how are we not any closer to taking care of this guy?
Right.
And I go back to 1993 with Emmitt Smith. This happened with, I think it was 93. I could be wrong in my year. Don't sue me. But, they did it with Emmitt. They've done it with other guys. But, Micah's been there. I will say he's been there. And although he's not practicing, like, Micah is an extremely hard worker. And I'm sure he's getting in his work in the side or inside when the media is not around. But again, we're talking about the messaging. You drafted this guy in the first round pick. This guy's been a multi-time first team All-Pro. He's one of the only players ever in NFL history to make first team All-Pro on the same team at two different positions. So what is the concern with paying him? I don't know. And Striker, can we throw that graphic back up? So let's look at that. Most sacks in the first 4 seasons, and he's one off of Hall of Famer DeMarcus Ware. All these guys here, JJ is going to be a Hall of Famer. DT is who he is. Reggie White's one of the GOATs. And this was a concern for Jerry Jones, and talked about how much time Micah has missed. So think about how much Micah time he's missed over his first 4 years, and he's still,
Right.
one from DeMarcus Ware. And so he could very well have flirted with the Derek Thomas numbers had he not, missed as much time as he has. But the guy has produced. Enough said. He is the linchpin for your defense. And if we're calling a spade, he is the best player on this football team. Again,
And by the way, to sort of full circle this point, that graphic said the Minister of Defense, Reggie White, he was the Minister of Defense, right? That's right.
something like that.
Yeah, I think he was the Minister of Defense. You can double check that, Striker. And then Micah are the only 2 players in NFL history with 12 plus sacks in their first 4 NFL seasons. So even if he misses time and missed 4 games last year, he's still doing more work than 99% of the edge rushers in the NFL. And I would also point out, and Aiden Hutchinson hasn't signed his deal yet. I would imagine Aiden Hutchinson, who only played 6 games last year, there's not going to be a lot of feet dragging in Detroit to get him locked up, because he is back and he is getting after it like you would expect Aiden Hutchinson to. So we just can't fall for the trap of what Jerry's doing, because we know what Jerry's up to. You just got to let him act out and then pay Micah his 45, and then we can get on with the rest of our days.
And to what he's doing, I'm feeding right into it because we're talking about him again. So there's that.
Yeah, you fell for it for sure. Sort of a more narrow underachiever moment here for the Cowboys is I want to talk about Mazi Smith. And look, he hasn't been bad. He hasn't been terrible. He just hasn't been a first-round difference maker. And he will admit as much. And I do give him credit, because he's talked to the media about how he ain't paying attention to anybody but his coaches and his teammates in terms of what he needs to do. And that's probably a smart way to think about it. But I went back and watched his reps over the weekend, and he's out there. He played 25, 30 snaps, I think, on split between run and pass. And, he's not impactful getting into the backfield consistently versus the run. He's not impactful as a pass rusher. And the athleticism that he had coming out of Michigan, you wanted to see more of that, and you just haven't seen it. And look, man, if Mike is not going to be out there in the first few weeks or however long it may be, you need someone to step up. They drafted Donovan Ezraku, who's the edge rusher out of BC. At 245, 250, I don't think he's going to give you 15 sacks in year 1. He may, but you would like to see something from your first-round pick in Mazi Smith. What do you think of Mazi coming out? And how do you motivate someone with these athletic traits who just haven't, they haven't hit on all gears yet? It's just kind of, it's hard to wrap your brain around it.
Well, while I answer your question, can you look up and see who the Cowboys defensive coordinator is?
I think it's
But
Matt Eberflus.
so if it's Eberflus, right? So no, is it? I know he was there before, but just check. But I thought Mazzy coming out was a first and second down, run defender. I didn't see a guy that was going to be, a high end sack
Okay.
guy. I just thought the run game, being stout at the point, holding the point, keeping the linebackers clean on the second level, having the ability to, attack an edge as a changeup is how I kind of saw him. But with Eberflus there, I was going to try to, make an excuse for him, being that that Dan Quinn was the defensive coordinator when he was drafted, who's a former D-line coach, and they play more of an attacking style. But I mean, in Eberflus's defense is the same way. The guys, you want to have guys that can attack, guys that are, have the ability to be stout at the point, but can hit gaps and hit edges. But Michigan plays a lot of, the odd front where there's two gap, read and react type system. So it's a little bit different. I'm if my memory served me correct, he played in a frog stance or a square stance in college, and now you're asking him to play with a split stance now and be able to get off an attack. And you said, like, how do you motivate a guy? Like, if you're trying to figure out how to motivate a first round pick, we got there are other questions to ask,
right?
As well. So, I hope Mazzy meant what he said and that he's not listening to me, and he's only listening to his teammates and his coaches, because that would be the best advice.
Yep.
At this point, because we can sit here and tear down his game all we want to, but he has to be able to step up and make plays for this team.
And I'm sure he's well aware that he's not living up to his personal expectations, or as the coaches have explained it to him. So I understand all that. Well, I got you here. Let me ask you this: looking at that draft class, that was the 2023 draft class, I think. Jalen Carter was the first defensive lineman taken 9th overall, and Eagles got a bargain on that one. 26 is when Mazzy went off the board. Would you rather have Mazzy or, I know the answer, but I'm going to go through some players that were drafted after him, and you tell me. Brian Brzee went 29th.
I like Brzee a little bit more. Not a whole lot more, but I liked him more.
Yeah, and he's been pretty good when healthy. Jervon Dexter went 53rd overall.
They were kind of
Right.
similar to me. But I like Dexter more. He was longer, played with length better, had more of an ability to press blocks. He was another guy I saw as a first and second down guy. I didn't see him as much of a pass rusher, but I just liked his size and his length, that if he was in there in passing situations, he can get his hand up to restrict those throwing lanes.
And these guys, one plays, you can move him around, but he played a lot of outside early in his career in the NFL and in college. And then this young man, you can move all over the place. One went 46, one went 54. Keon White went to the Pats, and Tuli Tuipulotu went to the Chargers. Either one of those guys?
Yeah, I like both of those guys, but they're edge guys.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
they're you could get away with playing them in a 4-eye and in nickel in those obvious passing situations, but they're not going to live on the inside in those rundowns. So I wouldn't even have had them from a vertical ranking standpoint. They wouldn't have been with the nose tackle. They only would have factored in on the horizontal ranking.
Gotcha.
As to who was the better player on the board at that time.
They would have been in a different column for the verticals.
Right.
All right. And then one last one. And again, he plays inside, but you can move around a little bit. 3rd round pick, Kobe Turner, who surprised a lot of people.
Yeah. Now he would have factored in a lot more, but with these guys. But again, we're talking about, Kobe Turner is essentially a nose tackle. A one technique. He can't play 3 technique, but I just saw, to use the two you said, I saw Mazzy and Jervon Dexter both as like nose tackles.
Okay.
0 and 1 versus a guy like Kobe Turner. He can play your 1 and he could play, your 1, your 2-eye, and your 3 technique.
Let me ask you this, because maybe I'm asking the wrong question. If Mazzy is your 0, if he's playing right over the center, is he doing enough, or what do you want to see him do? Because I would imagine you want some sort of disruption as opposed to just taking on double teams all day.
Yeah, I mean, the double team part is what it is. Like, you got to be able to anchor in there and sit it down. And like I said, keep those linebackers clean at the second level and let them play off of you and make plays. But at some point, you're going to have a one-on-one. You got to be able to attack an edge, or you're going to have to be able to reset the line of scrimmage with your power.
Right.
And just knock the center back. And that's where I was talking about with Javon Dexter. He was able to at least play with length and create separation from the block and use his length and his size and strength to press blocks to help recreate the line of scrimmage. And that's where, Mazzy has short area quickness, short area burst to close. Wasn't the longest guy per se from an arm length standpoint. But again, man, it's at some point you got to just turn it loose.
Right.
And go out there and make plays. And, and we're coming to that time. This is the time where these guys are going to want to get paid. And, you can't get paid if you're not making plays.
Right. Yep. Thank you for that explanation. All right. That's it for our overachievers, underachievers. One last thing before we get out of here. Biggest thing you'll be watching week 3 of the preseason. And week 3 of the preseason is a little different now than it was a few years ago because you played 4 weeks of the preseason. And this was historically the time where the starters, quote unquote, played. So we see different teams handle that differently in terms of playing their starters. But your thing, and this doesn't change, you told Stryker this before it was announced by the Browns that Joe Flacco is going to start week 1. But the Browns quarterback rotation is something you're interested in watching in week 3. And I'll push it out further than that. How long until we see someone not named Joe Flacco starting a quarterback, because he's 40, and I don't think it's realistic to expect him to play in 17 games. And also, depending on their record, there may be some urgency in terms of seeing what Dillon and or Shador can do. And assuming Kenny Pickett's still on the roster, we don't know what he might be capable of.
Yeah, I don't think you see anyone other than Joe Flacco before the first quarter of the season.
Okay.
He's going to start the first 4 games just to, more than anything, get the offense rolling. But the reason why I want to see what this quarterback rotation is going to be, there was so much fuss after Shador's first preseason game that he should have went up to be the number 2. And then when they came out the following day and said, Shador's still 4th on the depth chart. This week, because Joe Flacco, I'm assuming, is going to play in this preseason game, this will be the Cleveland Browns dress rehearsal ending the preseason. To me, this is where you start to see who's going to make the team. And this is where you truly see the markings of what the depth chart is. And so it's going to be interesting to see who's going to go out there after Joe Flacco. And they'll probably play Flacco maybe the first quarter and then get him out. And then whoever's next is who they have as the number 2 quarterback. And, and so on and so forth. So to me, that's why I want to see what this rotation really is, because I think this will be the truest indication of what the depth chart is before week 1 starts. I think after the first preseason game, I don't think that was a true indication because, basically they say you can't lose your position based on injury. Well, the 2 guys that were already ahead of Shador at number 2 and number 3, they were injured. And so now Shador's had a start. Dillon Gabriel's had a start. Flacco's the starter. He's going to have a start. I think the truest form of who's going to be available is going to be who comes after Flacco in week 3.
And I haven't seen the latest, but I don't know where Kenny Pickett is with his hammy. And it could be a situation, correct me if I'm wrong, where they just hold him out as possibly trading him before the start of the season. Because I would imagine if you're only going to keep 3 quarterbacks, I don't think they would cut Shador. I don't know. But I don't think they would cut Kenny either, because that just feels like you traded a draft pick for him. Or maybe they just swapped DTR. I'm not sure. But either way, there's some meat left on that bone in terms of compensation instead of just saying, okay, thanks for your 2 months of service. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I mean, but again, we're talking about hypotheticals when it comes to the trade, because there has to be a market for Kenny Pickett. Right? You just can't say, hey, I want to trade Kenny Pickett. We're going to trade him to Minnesota.
Right.
Like you can say it, but I mean that, the guys in Minnesota want him. So there has to be a market for him. And, the last time we saw Kenny Pickett play was, mop-up time in the Super Bowl. And, if we're being honest, that didn't go particularly well,
Right.
even though they had a nice, comfortable lead and had the game in the bag. So it's unfortunate that Kenny Pickett got hurt and that no one you can see how he's improved, if he's improved. And so even right now, you're going into the Kenny Pickett market with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
But at least with the two young guys, you've seen them perform. You've seen what they can do in game situations. Now, again, which one gives you the best chance to win in the event that Flacco has to miss time? That's the next question for Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. My sort of burning question going forward into week 3 was basically a larger version of what you just talked about, sorting out the quarterback situations, the open quarterback competitions around the league. Cleveland is clearly one beyond Joe Flacco for the number 2 job. The Colts, Daniel Jones started, Anthony Richardson came in, had a great throw down the field that was called back because of a penalty, so didn't count, but you're seeing the glimpses, and we talked a lot about AR5, seeing the glimpses. We just want to see more consistency. The Dallas quarterback situation after Dak Prescott, what does that look like? Maybe they're a team that thinks about trading for one of these veteran quarterbacks. The Detroit Lions, you talked about Hendon Hooker versus Kyle Allen. The Vikings, Sam Howell, I didn't go back and watch all his throws, but some of the throws I saw weren't great. There's a reason he's been a backup at several stops after leaving Washington. And then the Saints, I talked about Spencer and Tyler Shuck, and I think they've been pretty much neck and neck. And I would give the nod to Spencer based on the way he played the second half in Sunday's game. But also, let me ask you this. So let's say if you're just grading solely on play-by-play performance in terms of doing what you're asking him to do and being efficient, how much do you have to weigh the fact that Spencer's playing against a bunch of guys who may not end up making rosters because he played into the third and fourth quarter in this week 2 game? I thought Tyler was okay early on. I think he had a sack and he fell down early in the first drive. I don't care about that. He came back and made some throws. But do you weigh it all the fact that you're not getting first or second team reps, even though you're doing what you're being asked to do if you're Spencer Rattler?
No, because if I'm not mistaken, didn't Spencer Rattler start the first game?
Yeah, he did.
So he's played against those guys as well. This is just a part of it.
Right.
You can make that same argument in the Colts battle, where Anthony Richardson started the first game and then Daniel Jones came in, and then vice versa. So you can make that argument on either one of these scenarios. I just think at this point, I do think Spencer Rattler has the edge in New Orleans. He's just moved the ball, and Tyler Shuck, he's flashed. He did what he did last year, and why people liked him coming out, because you can see the ability. But at this point, he's an older guy, and he's 25, 26 years old. And so how much development time do you need at that age, playing the amount of college ball, been in the amount of systems you've been in? So this is the game for him to step up, stake his claim, and be the guy that the Saints hoped today that he would be when they took him 40th overall.
All right, I'll get you out on this. I'll get me out too. I'm not going to hang around afterwards and just stare at the screen. Let's say Spencer does win the job. Kellen Moore, first year head coach, young guy. He's still in his 30s, I believe. How long are you sticking with Spencer? Because they didn't draft Spencer. They drafted Tyler Shuck. So Spencer goes out there and is inconsistent for the first 3 weeks. Because once you bench him, you can go back to him, but we just talked about the mental aspect of Jake Moody having those successes. I would imagine once you start, jerking around a youngish player, starting, not knowing his role, that probably affects his on-field productivity. So are you willing to commit to Spencer for 8 weeks, or if it looks bad in 3 weeks, you can make it a move?
Well, to quote the great Bill Parcells, I reserve the right to change my mind. so I do think this. I think if the Saints start with Spencer Rattler at quarterback, and the offense isn't being productive over the first 4 weeks. Now, again, this is where, and I don't know Kellen Moore. Seems like a really good dude, good human, but he's an offensive guy, former quarterback. He's an offensive coordinator. And now as a head coach, he's going to be looking at those stats to see where his offense is ranking. And if those offensive rankings are consistently in the bottom third of the league, he's going to be thinking about making a change, because one of the reasons why he was hired was to come in and fix the offense. And if that offense isn't getting fixed with Spencer Rattler, he's going to reserve the right to change his mind and be able to move on to Tyler Shuck or whomever else that's going to be able to get those rankings up in his favor to show why that he was hired to be the head coach of the Saints.
And the other thing is, and this is the reality of the profession that these young men have chosen, Spencer's feelings don't really matter because this team wins 2 games, they're going to have the first overall pick anyway. They're going to take a quarterback. So I suppose that the lesson is take advantage of the opportunities whenever you get them and don't worry about the stuff that you can't control. Even though I'm a huge Spencer Rattler supporter, he went 0-7 or whatever last year. So, he's got some experience, but it ain't great experience. So we'll figure this out together and we'll see what happens in week 3 of the preseason. For now, anything else?
Oh, man. Like I said, just excited to see what this week 3 is going to be. And then, man, for all my folks out there, I know a ton of you guys in the personnel departments. You watch Ryan and I. Hey, man, good luck the rest of the way. I know it's this is the grind time. So shout out to all the pro departments. Get overlooked just because of the draft, and the draft is so much, it's so exciting for everyone else. But this is where pro guys make their money. Unearthing the preseason guy that's a late claim or a practice squad addition that's going to eventually help your team. So shout out to all the pro departments in the league right now. And, their families are going to miss them, this upcoming weekend, because there's going to be a 3-4 day stretch where they're in at 6 a.m. and out past midnight, just making sure that their team is well positioned to when these cuts are happening, that their teams can, put these waiver claims in, these late trades. And so shout out to all you guys. I definitely know the work that you put in. Definitely don't miss it. But best of luck to you.
All right. One last thing. Is it more frantic to do the waiver claims at the end of week 3 of the preseason, or sign the undrafted free agents the second the draft ends?
Ooh, which is more frantic?
Yeah, in terms of it's crazy time in the office trying to make sure you get who you're supposed to get and
no,
coordinate
the
with people.
100% the post-draft process.
Okay.
Because that's the wild, wild west. I don't care how organized your process is.
Okay.
Everything is changing in real time.
Yeah.
But with the cut down process, that there's going to be a 24-hour window that you have because the league is going to produce the waiver wire, and that's the when you hear that email alert come out, and somebody usually yells down the hall, "Waivers out."
Okay.
And then you sit there and you have 24 hours to go through that list, watch those guys, and make your claim. Versus the draft process, this is all happening in real time.
Striker, if you want to ask a question, you got to hit the mute button.
I know this is my first time caller, long time listener. Is that more frantic, or us asking for consensus rankings every week?
I haven't gotten the consensus rankings every week.
You breaking news, Striker?
When I got to ask you for all your consensus rankings.
Nah, that doesn't bother me. What's more? I gotta
work harder, I guess.
No, what's more frantic is trying to get this link to work on a week-to-week basis.
Come on.
I didn't say the provider's name. I left that part out.
I just threw it under the bus. All right. Well, that's my cue to leave.
Well, you know what? Maybe here's what we'll do, Ran. I think this would be a fun exercise for us. We'll do a live show all 24 hours after all the cuts come down, and we'll rank. We'll get a big board of all the undrafted available free agents for teams to look at our list, and if they need some help, we can have our 24-hour live stream going. And
let's live stream it. Let's get.
Well, you know what day that is? I might be on vacation.
Striker.
Let's call up iShow Speed and Casanat and Duke Dennis and all those streamers, and let's get them all on here. They can help us.
All right. I think that's our cue to go take a break. We'll be back on Wednesday. We'll be on Network, and we're going to talk about our 5 favorite college players heading into the start of the season. The start of the college football season is 7 days away, I think. 9 days away in Ireland. So that's going to be fun, and that'll be fun stuff.
We got a game this Saturday.
Oh, we do? The 25th?
Yeah. 24th.
24th. That's it. That's the Ireland game. All right. Well,
week 0.
Week 0 is here. We'll get ahead of it in a few days from now with our 5 favorite players to talk about in college football. We'll do that. In the meantime, thanks to you guys who watch and listen and comment, and we will see you on Wednesday.